for a decade or so, Communist Party leaders have had little respect for the United States. But with the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, the failure to deter Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, we know that Chinese leaders think that they can do what they want.
It is not the first time that China has been lit up by the U.S. relationship with Taiwan, but it may well be China's biggest and loudest response. Missiles, planes, ships, creating a near strangulation of the island nation, which is only about the size of the state of Maryland. Does it mean, though, that China is closer to actually trying to take over Taiwan now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now? It's a mystery right now, but it is a dangerous mess. So we are pleased to have Gordon Chang with us tonight. Gordon, welcome to Centerpoint.
Thanks so much, Doug.
You wrote 5 days ago, in advance of Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, when there's a lot of controversy surrounding it, and I quote, "There are no longer any safe options. The most dangerous, at least in the long run, is for Speaker Pelosi to back down." Well, she didn't back down. She went. What are the results?
The results are that at least Beijing now knows that there are at least a few Americans in Washington who will stand up to them. The real problem here was that if she didn't go, then she would have emboldened and legitimized the worst elements in the Chinese political system by showing everybody else that intimidation tactics work. They may work on President Biden, but they're not working on Speaker Pelosi. So that's a good thing. But Beijing is not going to let this go. You know, we've seen these missile launches today. We're probably going to see some other provocative acts. This is going to be a dangerous time.
But you're not convinced an invasion is imminent, or even imminent over a span of a couple of years, perhaps?
It's not imminent this year, and my guess is because of the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party. If tradition holds, it will be October or November. Now, each of these national congresses is crucial, but this one more so because this is where Xi Jinping either gets or doesn't get his unprecedented third term as General Secretary of the party. In other words, this is where he becomes or doesn't become China's dictator for life.
So he's not presently a dictator in your mind. I think the perception, the growing perception in the United States is that he has become that, but the party still holds some power, some sway over what he can do?
Yeah, especially this year, because Xi Jinping had been really all-powerful for quite some time. And because of that, he embarked on policies that are now being considered responsible for some really serious problems inside China. So, for instance, you have the zero COVID policy, which he's considered the author of. Nobody really likes that. That's forced the economy probably into contraction from all that we can tell. You got the debt crisis, the bank runs, the mortgage boycotts, you name it. And so Xi Jinping, I think, has been forced to step back a little bit. People have now assumed a little bit more responsibility for the economy. And this is a trend that probably will continue because Xi's policies are not working.
To that point, you wrote he needs an external crisis, President Xi does, so that the Chinese people won't think too much about the internal ones. That's something that Americans don't really focus on that much.
Yeah. We Americans think that the number one goal of Communist Party foreign policy is to take over Taiwan. You hear that often. Actually, it's not. The number one goal of Communist Party foreign policy is to maintain Communist Party rule. And right now, I think what's happening is you're seeing all sorts of problems. I mean, we focus on Taiwan, but there are problems in India, Philippines, Japan that China is provoking. China is engaged in these dangerous intercepts of ships and vessels. And aircraft in the global commons. And all of this really means that it's driven, I think, by the internal issues. You know, China's regime is militant anyway, but now it's even more so because they realize they've got a lot of unhappy people in China, and they would probably want to sort of distract them from the policy mistakes that have been made over the last half decade or so.
What is the issue behind the bank protest? We've seen pictures of ordinary citizens protesting their inability to withdraw cash from banks. What's that all about?
This really has this genesis in the debt crisis. There's just too much debt. And especially that debt we see in the property sector, which is really important for China's economy. It accounts for somewhere between 25 to 30% of gross domestic product. By standards of other countries, that's really huge. So you've got these big property companies, they are defaulting. People are not paying their mortgages because in China, people buy flats which have yet to be finished. And they're saying, well, look, these apartments will never be finished, so why should I pay my mortgage? Suppliers to the property companies are not paying their mortgages, so therefore the money in the banks is tight. And banks just don't sometimes have money to pay off depositors. And it's not just the ones in central China. It's also we see in Shanghai, the financial capital.
I see. Where do you get your information from? Is it all from open source information, just sort of reading the tea leaves, or do you have sources in China who feed you information?
Increasingly fewer and fewer sources in China. And the reason is that Xi Jinping has been closing the country off. He's turfing out foreign journalists and others. Academics in China don't want to talk to foreigners. So basically, we know less and less about what's going on. And that means we have to go, criminology, in fact, basically looking at propaganda, which is important, especially in a communist regime. And just things that we see, over the course of time give us hints of what's occurring inside China.
So in the face of all these internal problems, why such tremendous bellicosity in the face of Pelosi's visit? I mean, some of the statements have been just really outrageous, seemingly indicating the potential for war, if not outright war.
Yeah, well, the problem's in China, but there's also an added layer to that, and that is, for a decade or so, Communist Party leaders have had little respect for the United States. But with the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, the failure to deter Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, we know that Chinese leaders think that they can do what they want. And this was aggravated on July 20 when President Biden to reporters said, the Pentagon doesn't think it's a good idea that she goes. That was unintentional, but it was signaling to Beijing that they could intimidate the United States. So clearly the propaganda sounded even more dire. There was much more of it after July 20. That's a real indication that they made this a much bigger crisis than it ordinarily would have been if she had, for instance, gone unannounced to Taipei.
On the subject of bellicosity, you wrote also that Xi is also leading a nationwide mobilization effort, something signaled by the amendment of China's national defense law. What is this amendment to China's national defense law?
What this does is it takes away certain power over mobilization from the State Council, which is the Chinese central government, which is civilian, and it gives it to the Communist Party's Central Military Commission, because the Chinese army, the military, is not a state army, it's a party army. And the party has always had control over these things, but now they're formalizing it. And we're seeing over the course of 2 years moves to mobilize society to get it ready for war. So, for instance, private entrepreneurs are now privately saying that Communist Party cadres come up to them and saying, you're no longer making what you're making. You're now making what we want you to make. And those products are sometimes useful for a war. And that's why we have to be concerned about what's going on inside China right now.
So much insight from Gordon Chang. I really appreciate you coming to our studios in person. Great to see you, Gordon.
This has been a thrill, Doug, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Doug McKelway, and thank you for watching Centerpoint. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Leave a comment below and keep the conversation going by sharing this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.